Hello there, welcome to Things Lucy Reads. I'm Luce and you are watching a summer reading wrap-up. The first book that I read in December of last year was Bloom Into You Volume 3 by Nakatani Neo. At the time, I was probably still not sure if I would continue on with this series. I wasn't sure what direction it was going to go in, but I have since read the entire series and it was just so incredible, and it's some of the best writing and character work that I have ever seen in a manga series. So whatever I thought back in December when I read this for the first time is now meaningless in the face of me having reread what I'd previously read and then going on to read the entirety of the series. There will be a video going up in a little while about this series specifically, in which I talk about my feelings in much more depth. And then the next book that I read is The Lover's Dictionary by David Levithan, and it's very good timing on my part filming this wrap up today because I am literally about to send this book to one of my friends. I have unhauled it. One of my friends said they would like it, so I am sending it to them. I was just incredibly underwhelmed by this. I've read Boy Meets Boy and also Two Boys Kissing by David Levithan, and I adored both of them, but this one just felt so flat and I only gave it 3 stars, and ultimately this one just didn't do it for me, and hopefully my friend gets more out of it than I did. The next book that I read in December was Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo, which I read as an audiobook, which was narrated by Elizabeth Acevedo herself and Melania Louisa Marta. I adored this book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. One of the characters was gay, which was wonderful. It's a story about these 2 girls who are half-sisters, but they don't know about that until their father is killed in a plane crash when he's traveling from the US to Puerto Rico, and they know that he spends half of the year in a different country, but they don't know that he has a whole other family in each country. And the unraveling of that was really heart-wrenching to read, like, because you know it straight away, but you know that the girls don't. But ultimately it was so satisfying, and it's just like a really lavish experience to sit there and listen to this wonderful art that she creates with words. It's unlike anything I've ever experienced before. It's honestly just so incredible, and if you haven't read an Elizabeth Acevedo book yet, you should definitely get on that because they are all just absolutely phenomenal, and I really look forward to rereading them in the future. And then the next book that I read in January was an absolute hit for me. It's Tangleweed and Brine by Deirdre Sullivan with illustrations by Karen Vaughan. This is a collection of fairy tale retellings, and a lot of times you will hear certain fairy tale retelling collections be lauded as subversive feminist retellings, and I've almost never found a collection that actually fits that bill, but this one does. The first story in the collection is Cinderella, and Cinderella does not even go to the ball in it. She just does not even go to that ball. So instead of trying to give her more agency within the confines of the original story, Deirdre just throws it all out the window and decides that Cinderella's gonna escape, but it's not gonna be through marriage. And that was the first, like, even after I read that first story, I knew that this collection was going to be absolutely incredible. And then it was. And then the other thing that it did that I want to talk about is that there are 2 sides to feminism. It's not all about women. It's about people of other genders as well. And I'm not about to tell you that there's trans rep in this book because there isn't. But part of feminism is also giving men the space to break out of the toxic archetypes of masculinity that they have been taught they have to embody. If your feminism doesn't allow men the space to have emotions and to express those emotions and to be soft or feminine or any other thing that makes them human beings but is perceived as lesser, then your feminism is false. So what this story collection also does is it gives certain male characters the space to not be what the original fairy tales paint them as. It gives them space to be whole human beings, who have the power to control their own narrative, to set their story straight, and to be the master of their own destiny and not just be this predator or murderer or villain, which a lot of men in a lot of fairy tales are. One of the stories in this collection particularly did that, and that was when I knew for sure that I loved this book, and it's definitely going to be a contender for one of my best books of the year, because I have never read any fairy tale retellings like this, and there's more to making it feminist than just giving your female protagonist a sword. Sorry, not sorry. But this one is incredible. Definitely recommend checking it out, because it was just everything I ever wanted, except maybe some queer rep. And I just felt enriched when I'd finished it. So definitely recommend this one. Then the next book that I read is a children's book. It is Ogilvy by Deborah Underwood with illustrations by T.L. Macbeth. This is about a bunny who moves to a new town and discovers that bunnies who wear dresses do certain things in the town, and bunnies that wear sweaters do certain other things. But the clothes that Ogilvy wears aren't clearly a dress or a sweater. So where does Ogilvy fit in? What should Ogilvy do? And that's the premise of the book. I only just noticed when I picked it up to do this video that the title up here is flocked, which is very nice. In case you can't tell, it's trans as hell, queer as hell, and I absolutely adored this book. I gave it 5 stars, and I will be holding on to it forever, because even though I'm not planning to have children, it does not mean that I will never have children in my life who will benefit from this. And even if I don't, I benefit from it. So definitely recommend this one as well. It was incredible. Okay, and then the next book I read, please excuse my English mouth, is Lao Tzu's The Tao Te Ching, which is translated in this edition by Ursula K. Le Guin. So this is the central text for the religion or belief system of Taoism, or Taoism, sometimes it's spelt. I feel like just reading this is not quite enough to understand Taoism on the whole, but it was worthwhile reading it anyway, and I'm going to supplement that reading with some further texts about Taoism and the theory of it. Alan Watts has written literally dozens of books about this, and I have a couple of his books, and I will be starting reading those. I am just really interested. I did not give it a rating, but definitely worth reading. There are several translations. I just picked this one because Ursula K. Le Guin. Really enjoyed this reading experience as well, and I'm very keen to enhance my knowledge further down the track. And the last book that I read in December is volume 2 of What Did You Eat Yesterday by Fumi Yoshinaga. This series follows Ken and Shiro, who are a middle-aged gay couple living together in Japan, and just the ins and outs of their lives and the way they navigate being out or not out at work, and how that affects how they relate to each other and the way that they live their life. It's just really nice, and it centers like the meal that they eat together at the end of the day. So a lot of it is like the recipes that Shiro is making and him shopping for ingredients and that kind of thing. And honestly, it is just such a delight, and I probably gave this 4 or 5 stars because I just really enjoy it so much. And now we are on to January. I read several books this month as well. The first 2 books that I read were audiobooks. The first one was Pet by Akwaeke Emezi, which I borrowed from my library, and then the second one was Australia Day by Stan Grant, which I also borrowed from my library. The story of Pet by Akwaeke Emezi is about a trans girl, and she lives in this utopian town where there are no monsters. They have eradicated all of the monsters, and life is perfect, and no one is ever hurt, no one is abused or hit or anything, except that's not quite true. And one day she accidentally releases from a painting by her mother this entity called Pet, who is a monster hunter, and the story progresses from there. In addition to being trans, Jem is also sometimes non-verbal and signs a lot, and only will speak verbally if, you know, the situation really calls for it, or she really wants to. Most of the time she just signs. This book had a lot of very valid things to say about how we perceive monsters and how we perceive victory, and how we may think that something is done, there are no more monsters, but unless we are truly doing the work to follow up on this, then we are not done and there is no victory. And unfortunately, if you do not finish doing the work and your victory isn't true, people are still going to get hurt, except that because there are no monsters, you're not going to believe them. It was absolutely devastating to read, but in a fulfilling way. I think that everyone should read it. It obviously deals with some pretty heavy topics, so if you are not at all comfortable with reading about abuse, sexual abuse of a minor specifically, maybe steer clear of this book. But if you can stomach reading it, it's definitely worth it, and I'm just very keen to read everything that Akwaeke Emezi comes out with in the future, because I think that they're just going to be an absolute literary powerhouse, and I'm excited to go along for the ride. And then the book Australia Day by Stan Grant was a collection of essays mostly centered around the celebration that this country does of Australia Day on the 26th of January, which in recent years has come up against protest because January 26th is the day that Captain Cook landed on these shores and the invasion of the country began. And pretending that it was anything other than an invasion at this point is unforgivable ignorance. Stan Grant is a TV personality here in Australia, and he is an Indigenous man. He talks a lot about Australia Day and how his perceptions of it have changed throughout the years, and also how his perspective has been shaped by the fact that he is an Indigenous man, but he's a well-known TV media personality, and for many years of his life he actually lived in Hong Kong and didn't live in Australia at all. And it's just a really fascinating insight into all of these three things and how they intersect and shape who Stan is as a person. It's definitely worth listening to if you want to get any kind of insight into the issue of Australia Day. It was just a really fantastic book, and I will definitely be reading anything else that Stan Grant ever writes, because he's really compelling, and I was just so interested at every point and interested to hear how he thought about things, and in a lot of cases how his thoughts about things changed the more he learnt or the older he got. It was just really, really good, and it's another book that I think about pretty much all the time because it was just fantastic. The next book that I read was for the same challenges I read Australia Day for, and it is Ahsoka by E.K. Johnston, which is a Star Wars novel, obviously. I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. Ahsoka is hands down my favorite character in Star Wars. It used to be Poe Dameron, but let's just not talk about that. Poe is still second, but Ahsoka is definitely first. I loved everything that was explored with the character in this book, and it actually was a lot more queer than I was expecting. I went into it knowing that Ahsoka is meant to be a lesbian. All of the writers that write her that way. It's just that Lucasfilm puts a cap on how explicitly you can say she is gay and she has feelings for this woman. But I was still surprised by how explicitly that came through in the text. Like, literally the words feelings for her were used more than once. So that was a pleasant surprise. And I just really enjoyed the internal journey that Ahsoka went on about what it meant to her to have been a Padawan and how she could carry those teachings forward with her throughout her life without falling into the traps that the Jedi fell into that led to their downfall. And it was just very, very exciting and really enjoyable to read. Hopefully this year I will be able to pick up some more Star Wars novels, because this one really reminded me of why I loved them so much. And then the next book I read on Australia Day because it was relevant to that, and the book is Daybreak, which is by Amy McGuire and illustrations by Matt Chun. This is less of a narrative and more what is called a truth-telling about Australia Day. It's about this girl and her grandmother, and they travel back to country on the public holiday that is Australia Day, even though most of the girl's friends are off partying or going to the beach or whatever, and she just learns what the day truly means for her people and what it means to go back to country and what was taken and what they still have. And it was just really beautiful. And again, hopefully one day I will have small people in my life that can benefit from this book, but until then I am benefiting from it, and I would definitely recommend picking it up whether you do or don't have small people in your life, because it was just really beautiful and also really, really necessary. And I gave it 5 stars. And then I read 2 more books in the month of January. The first was a Kindle short. It was The Dream by Agatha Christie, and it was my Buzzwordathon book for the month. This was just a short story about Poirot. I'm sure I rated it fairly highly because it was really good, and I remember it being like really satisfying. Yeah, I gave it 4 stars. It was a Agatha Christie story, nothing particularly groundbreaking, but it also was not disappointing either. So what more can you really hope for? And the last book that I read in January was A Present from My Friend Echo, and it is Beyond the Gender Binary by Alok Vaid-Menon. This I gave 5 stars. It's very short. It's like a little introduction to what being non-binary means, which if you are a non-binary person isn't going to teach you very much, but at the same time it's like someone coming to you and holding your hand and saying, I'm here with you, I see you, and you matter. And that was just really wonderful to read. If you want to learn more, pick this up. If you just want to be validated, pick this up. Just pick this up. It was lovely. And then in February, I only read 2 books. The first one was Becoming Kiralee Lewis by Jane Harrison. I also read this as part of the challenge that I've mentioned a couple of times. This is about a girl called Kiralee who was adopted out as a baby and goes on a journey to find her Aboriginal family. This book didn't quite have me until about the 2/3, 3/4 mark. And then it really had me. And like up until that point, I was thinking, you know, this is an enjoyable read, but someone else is going to get more out of it than I'm getting out of it. And then it really sucked me in. And now the only thing I want to do with it is read it again and see what I get out of it the second time. It was just a really wonderful conversation about what family means, about how to deal with disappointment. Like, you might have this image in your mind of what your life is going to be and what your family is going to look like, and it may not quite live up to that, but it might still be the best thing that has ever happened to you. And it was just such a wonderful story. Kiralee was a really wonderful character. She did a lot of addressing her own internalized biases and prejudices in this book. She's Indigenous, but she had been adopted and raised by a white family and spent a lot of the book being like, well, I don't want any handouts because I'm Aboriginal. If you just work hard enough, you can get whatever it is that you need, which unfortunately is not the case. And in pretty short order, she starts to think that maybe she's not thinking about things the right way, and just because she hasn't experienced something doesn't mean that other people haven't experienced about it. And it's not that her parents have taught her to be racist, because they haven't. Her parents are wonderful. It's just that growing up in a white family who has money, who has opportunities, is going to give you a different worldview than if you grow up without those things. So she does a lot of unlearning of those things, and it was just really lovely. And if you can find a copy of this, I definitely recommend picking it up because it was just beautiful, and I'm already looking forward to reading it again. And then the last book that I read in February, and the last book that I will talk about in this video, is Artificial Condition by Martha Wells. This is the second Murderbot Diaries novella. I reread this series on audio throughout this year, just for my own comfort. It is very much a comfort read for me. I love Murderbot and pretty much every other character that you meet in this series. In this one, Murderbot kind of strikes off on its own to find out more about its past, encounters a few friends along the way and a few foes, is very sarcastic, and just kind of finds out more about who it is and what it wants and what it's ultimately hoping to gain out of life. And this series is just such a joy. I hope it never ends because it just makes me so happy. And it was, even though these books are full of action and fighting and danger, I just find them very soothing and very calming, and I adore them. And I gave this one 5 stars. It was great, but they're all great. Those are all of the books that I read in the summer that has just passed. If you have read any of those and would like to tell me what you thought of them, feel free to leave me a comment. If you've got this far and you want to tell me that you're here but you don't necessarily have anything to say, then leave me an emoji heart in your favorite color in the comment box and I'll know that you were around. That's all that I have for you for this video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in my next one. Bye everyone.